Okay, all right.
Okay.
Yes, it's already recorded.
Yeah, I'm recording that.
That's weird because it didn't give us the little "this meeting is being recorded" Zoom message.
Yeah, I'm recording it now.
All right,
Oh.
cool.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen now, guys. Just give me a second. Where is this? So, can you guys see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Yep.
Okay. Welcome, guys, to onboarding work groups documentation session that will be led by yours truly, Lafoka, also known as Lady Tempest on Discord. Yep. And we have the contributors to these slides as Vanessa and Sukun and Spice. Thank you so much, ladies. So let's get started, guys. What is documentation?
Love, can you make your presentation slideshow? So
I should share the link.
no, slideshow. So it like zoom in your presentation.
Oh.
So
See, like
Okay.
up at the top, love, in the bar at the top where it says slideshow on the right.
yeah, slideshow.
And if you
okay.
if you go to the drop down and it'll give you start from the beginning, which is what you want. Yeah.
So your PowerPoint looking, yeah,
Oh.
like that. All right, looking good right now.
Oh dear. So how do I navigate going back and forth?
Just a click should do it, I think, normally. But also, if you look down at the bottom left, there's a little back and forth navigation thing. There you go.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. So let's get started, guys. Thank you so much, Vani. Documentation. I know everybody has their own definition of what documentation is, but this is what I came up with. This is the simplest stuff I got. Documentation is a detailed explanation of how something works, how to use something, or in some cases, a written note on what transpired during an event, meeting, or session, and etc. What are the elements of documentation? So the elements of documentation include, but are not limited to, 1, title of the meeting stroke event with dates. 2, names of attendees stroke people present. 3, meeting narration or discussion items. 4, decision items. 5, action items. 6, learning points. 7, things to carry over to the next meeting, if there is any. 8, keywords. 9, topics covered. 10, it looks like here you can see onboarding work group meeting, 18th July 2024. We have Women in Tech Google Meet, 4th July 2030. That's what a title of a meeting or an event should look like. If you are using a paper, you could actually write it this way. If you're using an online document, you could still write it this way. Now we are going to names of attendees and people present. I think that's self-explanatory because this is the part where you put in the names of people who attended the event stroke meeting you were documenting or are documenting. For example, for whoever documenting today's session, if there's any, you write down people that are present in this session. Yep, to the next element, we have meeting narration stroke discussion items. Here, you write down agenda items stroke topics that were discussed. You can list them if you want. For example, Q3 budget fitting, we picked out items that will be carried over into Q4 due to the fitted budgets. And then we have another listed item, minutes from the last meeting. These are just examples, mind you. You could actually write it however you want, as long as you are noting down the agenda items and topics that were discussed. And we are at the decision items. I have noticed that most people actually find it hard to differentiate between decision items and action items. So I decided to write it with the simplest words possible. Now, decision items are actual decisions made in a meeting stroke event. You could actually add rationale to every decision and who it affects, if preferably. This can include approving a budget, deciding on whether we want a holiday or not. Example, we agreed to have a documentation on 15 August for those who want to learn how to document. That is today. You can see that there's the word agreed. It's something that everybody agreed to, something that everybody said, yes, let's do it. Now let's move on to action items. Now, action items are tasks assigned to team members or people present at an event or meeting to complete within or at a certain period of time. Example of that is Lady Tempest is to reach out to Alice concerning scripts before next week, Thursday. I just checking. I hope you guys can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Yep,
Yeah.
loud and clear.
Thank you. The next item is learning points. These are things we learned could have been done or said better, which did not lead to an actual decision or an action item. It's totally optional most times. List them if there are any. I actually do like these learning points because it's something that somehow turns out to be an agenda for the next meeting. And then we have things to carry over to the next meeting. If there is a next meeting, because I won't say that any meeting you attend, there'll always be a next. These are issues that came up and might need to be discussed again. It might be something that came up during the meeting or something on the agenda attendees didn't get to discuss because of time. Now we have keywords and topics covered. Here, you should just list words or phrases that highlight topics covered or discussed. Example, onboarding, reports, budgets, town hall updates, and more. Now we have sources and media. Here, you are to write down titles of books or papers used during the meeting, if any. You should also pen down links to outside documents, sheets, mirrors, video, or posts that were mentioned or used. Last but not the least, emotions or how the meeting felt. This would come from how you perceived the meeting or event. Example of words you could use are collaborative, funny, short, unusual, tense, and the rest of it. Then we have working docs. This is kind of similar to sources and media, as they are documents used frequently during a meeting or an event. It's best to give it the title of the actual doc itself rather than describing it. And other, this is the section where you write down any other thing that was discussed or mentioned that has nothing to do with the meeting agenda items. Okay. Now we are at tips and tricks, part 1. Note that this is a tested and trusted recommendation. You can take it or leave it. 1, as a documenter, you need to be attentive, ask for clarity during discussions to effectively capture what's being discussed. 2, if you mention something, explain it as if you are writing for someone who was not present. So if you say we made a decision about Lady Tempest dog, say which document and what the decision was. Be concise and don't ramble yourself, stroke repeat yourself. Yeah, don't repeat yourself. That's very important. Tip-centric part 2. For each topic on the agenda, ask yourself, what did the meeting decide about this, and were there any action items? Yeah, I do that a lot, just in case you've forgotten something. Be accurate and neutral, especially. Don't misrepresent points of view that you disagree with. That is very valid. So keep your emotions away when doing this. Recognize that people might not use the logic or thought process that you would use. Go by what they say, not what you think they ought to say. Give the rationale for a decision item if it's not obvious, and also capture any dissenting views. The next one, if a decision was made using a particular process, example, a vote or a Zoom poll, please say so. Now, this is another tips and trick. This part, I had to actually outline it. Do not rely on AI for documentation. This was originally written by ChatGPT. Yes, even AI actually did give a reason why you should not rely on it. Here is why. 1, context and domain knowledge. AI may not fully grasp the background of the meeting, leading to summaries that miss important, overarching themes. Specialized topics require domain-specific knowledge to accurately summarize, which many AI tools lack. Without this, AI may misinterpret terms or concepts and produce irrelevant and inaccurate summaries. 2, speaker identification. Yeah, I've seen this a lot in some summaries at our ambassador program. In meetings with multiple participants, AI might confuse who said what, affecting the accuracy of the summary. Most times it does confuse, not even might, it does confuse. Yeah. Now let's go to length and complexity. Lengthy and complex discussion can overwhelm AI models, making it difficult to distill the most important points effectively. We have subjectivity. Different participants prioritize different aspects of the conversations, and AI is not capable or able to reflect this varying focus accurately. Identification of key takeaways. AI can struggle to discern which points are most important to summarize, especially when there are multiple speakers and varying levels of contribution. It may fail to prioritize critical information effectively. 3, dynamic conversations. Meetings can cover multiple topics and change direction rapidly. With participants jumping between subjects, AI has difficulty tracking these transitions and keeping up with the flow of conversation without losing coherence, leading to disjointed summaries. So that is all on the tips and tricks of documentation and the items you need to understand about documenting. I think I was a bit fast. Can you guys still hear me?
Yep,
Yeah,
still
Yes,
hearing
yes.
you.
Yeah. So we are at the Q&A session. This is the part where you ask questions and anybody in the audience or me can answer you. I think I might have to exit full screen for this. Right. Let me check the chats. Thank you, Vali. So any questions, guys? Colin says AI gets confused. Of course it does. I have seen it in so many summaries. It's always
Oh, me too. I know what you mean. I was being there.
Yeah. So Question time, question time.
It's not really a question, but it's just leading on from that last bit about AI. I think as a community, we kind of need to know how to use an AI summary and how to make the most of it. We've seen all the things that it can't do, and unfortunately, I see a lot of new documenters trying really hard to expect it to do that or make it do that. So how can we use it effectively? What can it do? I'm just throwing that open to the floor, really.
Yeah. Well, to me,
Are you
I
wanting
think
to know like the limitations so that we can improve our LLM?
aside that, I think for now, I usually advise anyone documenting the session for the first time to always be present to document. I'm not saying you capture everything. At least there's a record that you could go back and check. But you being there to actually understand what is going on in the meeting would go a long way. You'll be able to get down rough notes, write down things that everybody said, get their view on things, so that when you go back to compare it to the recording, you'll be able to, I don't know, get the full documentation. It's always recommended from my end that you should be there, because when you are not there, you're going to rely on AI, and that is a horrible way to go. Just my 2 cents. Colin, do you want to say something? How can one differentiate between a suggestion, an insight, and a decision? That's a tricky one. Who wants to go for it?
I think this is partly a facilitator thing. If it is a decision, the facilitator kind of needs to have flagged it up and gone, does everybody agree? And kind of drawn people's attention to the fact that this is decisive. Suggestions and insights maybe haven't gone through that formal thing of the facilitator asking, does everyone agree? But the difficulty is that sometimes some facilitators don't do that. But yeah, that's how it should work. I'm just noticing that Eric's got a hand up before you asked that.
Yeah, please go for it, Eric.
Yeah, this it was a nice presentation. I really enjoyed it. But then I raised my hand before the question was asked, and I think what I wanted to say was I lost you at some point because you were quite fast. I think around some point. So I don't know, but though it's very self-explanatory, I don't know if it's possible for us to get the note or something. Would that be possible?
The slides.
The slides.
Okay, I could share that.
All right, I think that will be fine then. Thank you.
All right. Sure. Vanny, do you have the link handy to share?
Yeah, I do. Let me just get it. Hold on. Talk amongst yourselves.
So I think there's something in the chat.
You're funny.
Colin, what exactly is an action item? I think the name says action, an item, action item. I think it's more like a to-do, what you've been assigned to do. That's how I see it. For example, if in a meeting there is an error in a roster, and they're asking if anybody is up to edit the roster, take out the error, and then you say, I can do it, and everybody say, oh yeah, Colin, you can do it, you should do it. Now that's an action item. If I'm documenting, I will write it down that Colin is to do that, is to edit the error in the roster. And I'll add the dates. I think the most important part of an action item is the dates and when it is due. I'll add that. If it is due next week, Thursday, I will add that. If it is due next month, I'm going to put that down. The point of action item is what you've been assigned to do at a certain period of time or when it is due. I hope you got that, Colin.
Yes, I did, love. That was a great explanation. I figured it was something like that, but I just wanted to hear what you thought of it, and I like to hear somebody else explain it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. I can type roughly twice as fast as I can speak. I don't doubt it, Vanny. You are good there. So any other question, guys? Hey, advanced mayor, yeah, go for it.
But yeah, can you hear me?
Sure.
Yeah, so yeah, I really enjoyed the presentation. Yeah, I know Benny has been pressing my neck to do this work, yeah, with the AI. I mean, summary. Yeah. So I think I've observed some dynamism in how documentations, yeah, are kept within I mean, the ambassador group. Okay. Yeah, when it comes to identity. I've actually read some documentation or meeting summaries where the documenter chose not to identify, yeah, the people who were talking. So maybe agreed on this instead of let's say propose this instead of, let's say, allow, propose, let's do this. Yeah, and the other part of documenters, they will choose to identify the people who are involved in let me say that decision or that conversation. So from the best point of view, how do you advise that documenters go about? Is it trying to identify people or not identifying people to make things simple and it doesn't confuse anybody? So before that, I asked one other documenter and he told me that mostly he chooses to remove, like, disregard the identification so that someone will be like, oh, I didn't say this. Someone will comment, oh, I said this particularly. But if you actually take off the person's name in quotes, yeah, it makes it simple. I mean, nobody is going to attack you of what he or she said. Yeah. So how do you advise that? That's actually my first question for now. Yeah.
Who wants to go for it?
I mean, I can say something on that. I think it really depends on the type of meeting. If it's like a discussion meeting where people have come to kind of argue their case or give their view or whatever, it can be quite useful to attribute who says what, because people might want that to be recognised. If it's more of a collaborative process, then maybe it's less important. Yeah, maybe sort of more serious meetings or more contentious meetings you'd want to attribute. But the other thing is that this is something I was going to say later when I'll come back to it because I don't want to waffle on for ages. But a meeting very often is a place where people discuss and change their minds. It's not something where everything is fixed. Um, a meeting isn't static, it's a process, if you like, and it's participatory and it's interactive. The whole point of you being in a meeting is for your take on things to like develop, for you to hear other people and potentially be influenced by their ideas. You're there to think out loud. It's not a soapbox usually. It's not usually a place for you to kind of platform yourself and shout your own ideas into the ether, into other people's faces and bash it up against people. Yeah, it's an interactive process. So it's really hard to identify sometimes who said what or who defined the issue. But as a documenter, you can use your judgment and you can kind of listen to the recording or read the transcript and go, oh, yeah, that person made a significant contribution to that piece of thinking that came out of this meeting. So, yeah, it's kind of recognizing that. And, sometimes I do think that attribution is a good thing because it's a way of recognizing contribution and making sure that people are heard. And very often, in these spaces, people can be marginalized and less heard. So documentation can be a way of saying, oh no, actually, that person is the person who raised this point and brought it forward and discussed it. So it's not a very definite answer to your question. I think it's like partly the documenter's style, partly the type of meeting, and partly if you're recognizing that there are people who are facing barriers and not being heard, it can be important to recognize what they have to say. Sorry, probably a longer response than you wanted.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Okay.
So, Advanced Mayor, you said you had another question. Thank you so much, Vani.
Yeah. So I think more like the structure, yeah, and templates. I remember with some guilds, the template to which I mean some documentation meeting summary is written is different. Like you could see, yeah, down to another form of dynamism. Yeah, and I know how some have actually, I think, yeah, I mean, plan to get a form of template to guide. Yeah. So how do you shared the representation on the structure, but in terms of the format, how it should be. Yeah, there's I mean template or like if you're going to check your documentation for other guilds, you see that dynamism on the template is different. Someone will put this here and yeah, aside maybe some few ones. So what's the best, or I mean, what will you advise that, oh, let's stick to 1 or 2, 3 templates to do this? Or yeah, so that's the last question that I wanted.
Okay. Well, I'm aware that different guilds do have different formats of documentation. But I do know that the similar things I've seen is that they all have agenda items that could turn around and be a meeting narrative or discussion points. They all have decision items or decision ticks. They all have action items. So I would say you could just pick out what you are familiar with and I don't know, channel it there.
Okay. Okay. Thank
I don't
you.
know if that was satisfactory, but that's what I do if I'm documenting a new guild for the first time. I'll just go through their formats, see what I'm familiar with, you know, and then try and read about whatever extra formats they added, which shouldn't be hard if you go online and check it. But yeah, Vani, go
Okay.
ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the differences in the templates in the meeting summary tool, that was a lot of work that we did about 8 months to a year ago, kind of talking to different guilds and work groups and finding out what do you need to record. You know, say for example, Gamers Guild, they want to record amongst all the other things, what game did they play and who won. So their template needs to include that. So I guess if you're documenting for a new work group, you probably need to have a look at their template in the meeting summary tool and see what they've got. But maybe, you know, if there's anything there you're not used to.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
great. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Vani. But a summary, I do believe that you won't have a hard time because there's always something similar. Yeah, always something similar. Any other question, guys?
I do actually have a couple. Yeah, it's not like a question. It's more like what do people think type questions. Do you have to be there to document effectively, or can you document effectively just from a recording? And do you have to know the ecosystem? I think the latter one is more interesting because I am seeing new documenters whose documentation is a bit muddled because they don't know the issues that are being discussed. And that feels like a chicken and egg. It's like, how do you, documenting is a way that you get to know the ecosystem, but if you can't document effectively until you do, how do we approach that?
That's a hard one. Well, I'm going to try and answer the first. Maybe it's how I started, because right from the first day I did documentation, I was there to do it. And I realized that when people I've been going through summaries, when people don't attend meetings or they're there and they just rely on recordings, I'm always seeing too many errors that people that are always present. It's not just me that documents during the meeting, other people do it. But what I've noticed is that people who are present and still have the recording, they always have minimal to zero errors. It's just my observation. I don't know about any other person. So I always recommend people being there. Just be there. Because I don't know. That's just how I feel for the first question. And then for the second question, yes, documenting what you don't understand is actually hard. I think that there was a time, what was I documenting that time? Yes, the first AI ethics meeting I documented, Vanny. I didn't want to say it, but I was actually lost that day. When I volunteered to document, I didn't know what I was doing, but I don't know. I just had this feeling that with the way everyone is going to discuss, with the way the conversation will move along, I'm going to get the hang of it. I'm not going to recommend that style for anybody because that is tricky. Your mind has to run fast. You have to understand a conversation faster. You have to pick up on points, and so I always recommend maybe getting a background. Maybe there's a pre-meeting before whatever you're documenting, or maybe don't volunteer to document until you understand what the guild is actually on or what they're having meetings on. That's what I would do next time. Or maybe I'll still go with my first method. I don't know if that's an answer. Oh my God. What do you think, Vanny?
Yeah, I mean it is hard, obviously, if you don't know what you're listening to. I think maybe the two questions I posed kind of go together because when I first came into Project Catalyst, Caldano's Project Catalyst, I started off documenting stuff that I hadn't a clue about really. I didn't know who people were, I didn't know the organizations that were being referred to, but having a recording meant that I could go then and find out. And that was it. It was a real onboarding process for me to go and have to find those things out to make sense of what I was documenting. So in that instance, I think that's one reason that a recording is helpful.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you so much. Merriman, your hand is up. Go for it.
Hello. Hi. I want to add to what you guys are talking about, like being present in a meeting, especially if you don't understand it, it will also be good, It's better than using a recording because if you're in a meeting and maybe you're not familiar with like the work group or something, you can ask the question there to clarify something, instead of just freestyling it if you are not in the meeting and you just use the recording. So I think it's more important that a documenter should be in a meeting, right? And instead of using just the recording. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This goes back to my first point of being in a meeting, especially if you don't know what is going on. It is a strong recommendation you should take as important. Be there. Because trust me, when you are there, you get to understand things better. And you get to ask questions. That's the part I love. If there's a conversation going on in a meeting I'm documenting, I'm going to ask questions. I don't care if it's an AGI event, I'm going to ask you. I'll say, so what did you say here? Oh, do I have to write this? Oh yeah, that's what you said, right? Okay, that's good. Just ask questions to help you. Do not document and believe that what you think is the right thing. That is where you make so many errors. So yeah, that's just it. And Eric, I hope you saw this link to the slides in the chat. I remember you asked for it.
Yeah, I saw it. I saw it. I just want to add to what you guys are talking about, like being present in a meeting, especially if you don't understand it. It's not just me that documents during the meeting. Other people do it.
No,
What is
yes, I've seen it.
all right?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. What is tricky though is being in the meeting and yet not getting involved with it, but staying kind of detached as a documenter. Yes. Oh my goodness. Please do not do that. Do not be detached. If you are detached, you're not going to get nothing. You won't even understand what they're saying. Do not be detached. And don't get carried away. Because I've had this personal experience of where I think that was in one onboarding work group meeting. God really saved me that day. I was documenting, but I got carried away in the conversation. Like, it was bad to the point that I think the first 20 to 30 minutes, I didn't write nothing down. I was just enjoying the conversation. I think it was someone who asked, is the documenter writing this down, that made me remember I'm actually the documenter and I'm supposed to be documenting that. Why am I laughing? Why am I joking? Why am I making conversations? Instead of writing what I'm hearing or speaking about down. So yes, don't get carried away. It is very easy to get carried away, trust me. So do we have any other questions? Let me check the chat. CJ Frankie says he uses pen and paper. Oh, that's so sweet. But I'm not sure I'm a fast writer on pen and paper. I'm going to be horrible there, but I can type fast on my phone at least. We have ancient scribes here among us. Oh my God. If there are no other questions, I don't know. Maybe we should
I mean, I
suggestions.
was just going to say, if we could, I'd just like to backtrack a little bit to the issue that I was raising before about how a meeting, it's not static, it's a process. Because this is something I've noticed a little bit in documentation that I'm seeing around the place. It kind of seems to aim to capture, this is what this person thinks. And they take it quite often from what somebody says at the start. And for me, a meeting is somewhere where your perspective on something might change. Sometimes it might be useful to try and document that change and kind of record what the person says at the start and then what they say at the end. But sometimes that comes across really muddled. And when you're reading it through, you're like, hang on a minute, somebody said this and then they said that. And that's sometimes where I feel we should kind of restrict ourselves to decision and action items, because that tends to be the conclusions. It is quite hard to write a narrative that isn't too long, but that captures the transitions and the movement and the changes of opinion during a meeting. One way, I guess, is to try and you need a facilitator for this, to do this, to kind of go around the room and check how everybody feels at the start, then let the discussion happen and then do the same again. But I suppose what I'm raising here is that very often good documentation depends on a good facilitator. I mean, I remember there was a situation in Project Catalyst all those years ago when there was an organization called Circle that was kind of a governance organization. And for a while, they had the support of almost like, of semi-professional facilitators. Then they started doing it themselves, and documenting the meetings became so hard because they were leaping about from one thing to the next and they didn't follow an agenda. And yeah, it became really, so all I'm saying is that documenting that movement and that kind of transitions and changes within a meeting is a real skill. And it's bloody hard if you haven't got a facilitator supporting you to do that.
Yeah, that's true. because sometimes the facilitator gets so speedy that it's hard for you to backtrack and I don't know, hang on to a particular thing that was said and who said what. Well, I'm always happy to have Vani facilitate. She makes everything easy to document. That was how my AI ethics first documentation meeting went through. It was so smooth, thanks to Vani. So yeah, a good facilitator does matter. Merriman says, is
Yeah.
being a documenter something that is assigned or anyone can just do it in any meeting? Well, in some organizations that I've seen, they always have a secretary, you know, and or some kind of that's physical organizations though. The secretary is always the person to do that automatically. I've seen that so many times. And then, but for this our ambassador program, I think you would either have to say you want to do it or ask to be assigned if there's no one assigned to it already. Because we do not want to have double or two documenters in a meeting. So at least maybe ask or notify everybody. In onboarding work group, we do have a roster for it. So they just know that this particular day, you are documenting and you are facilitating. That's how it works, Merriman. Well, in African Guild, I've been there and I've seen that sometimes you have to ask if you could document, or the facilitator could actually ask who's going to document, and that's where you signify your interest in it. I hope that answered your questions. Does anybody have something else to contribute? It doesn't have to be a question or an answer. If we do not have something else to say, I think we'll have to come to the end of this session. I'm going to share the link to the slides again for people that are just joining or we're going in and out. Link is in the chat, guys. So I guess this is it. This is the end. Thank you so much, guys, for coming to this session. Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening. And thank you for taking part in the conversations. I really do appreciate.
Thank you so much, love. Well done.
Thank you, love. You did a good job. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for attending. And please remember, we are on vacation for the next 2 weeks. No meetings.
Yay! This is a good.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so see you in onboarding in September.
Yeah,
And of course, the documentation and facilitation roster has been updated, so you can have a look.
Yeah.
Yeah, the link is in any agenda you can find, any meeting agenda you can find. You'll see the link there.
Yeah. All right, guys. Bye. Who's going to tap on the red button? Let me stop sharing screen.
I think I've got the red button, haven't I? End meeting for all. Shall I do it? Oh my goodness.
Do it.
Oh, Yemi is literally just coming in, so I'll admit him so that we can tell him it's ending. Otherwise, he'll be confused.
Bye,
Bye,
Yemi.
Yemi. We're just ending the